What are some of the most important points that you think show that Trump's going to win?
Well, first of all, an open seat is hard to win, so we don't have the sitting president running. The Democrats took a pasting in the midterms, always a bad sign. You've got a third party. Third parties are bad news for the party in power. You don't have the Obama administration matching anything like the Affordable Care Act in the second term. You don't have a big foreign policy triumph that the Democrats can campaign on, like getting rid of bin Laden. And in Hillary Clinton, you don't have a John F. Kennedy. So that's 6 factors.
That was the man who's known as American University's prediction professor, Alan Lichtman, on Morning Joe back in September of 2016, adding to his streak of correctly predicting the winner of every presidential election since 1984. In an updated version of his book, The Case for Impeachment, Professor Lichtman now predicts an impeachment investigation of Donald Trump will likely commence this spring. And Professor Lichtman joins us now, also with us, White House correspondent for Bloomberg News, Shannon Pettypiece. Good to have you on board with us, Shannon, as well. So you predict an impeachment investigation. When did this fall upon your mind?
This fell upon my mind, first of all, after the appointment of the special counsel, which had not happened when I put out the first edition of my book, and lots of information. I believe that now there is as strong or a stronger case of obstruction of justice than there was against Bill Clinton on a vastly more important matter than a blue dress. And remember, virtually every Republican voted for an obstruction article against Clinton. Secondly, I believe with respect to, and I will not use the word collusion, because that's kind of like bursitis, you know. It's a catch-all. I'll use the word conspiracy. I believe we have the tip of the iceberg of what the special counsel knows about the relationship between Trump and the Trump team and the Russians. And there's a fair chance that the reason they were covering up all of those calls from the then National Security Advisor, or to be National Security Advisor in transition with the Russians, was to cover up quid pro quo. The Russians will help us, and in turn will ease those sanctions. Why else make those calls and why lie about them?
So, Professor, you're basing your prediction on what's a matter of public record, but none of us knows what Bob Mueller has. He's surprised us, in fact, with plea deals and indictments when he's come out with them. Isn't it premature to make a prediction like this when he could, in fact, go through his investigation and say, you know what, there was no collusion, there wasn't even a conspiracy here, at least one that involved the President of the United States?
Right. I've made my living on making predictions when other people think they're premature or unreasonable. As I said, from what we already know publicly, I think there's a solid case for obstruction. And certainly, there is already a lot of smoke, and I would say some flame, with respect to a conspiracy with the Russians. And there are a host of crimes involved here. Everyone keeps saying, oh, collusion isn't a crime. Of course not. But taking things of value from foreign nationals is a crime. Aiding and abetting illegal computer hacking is a crime. Negotiating as a private citizen with a hostile foreign power with which there is disputes is a crime. And if this is serious enough, and I've taken a lot of flack for that, I think there even could be charges of treason. Because after all, Russia was waging war against us. Not a war with bombs and bullets, but a cyber attack, an online attack designed to destroy our democracy.
Do you agree, Professor, that this Republican House and this Republican Senate would not vote to convict, though, President Trump? We had Jeff Flake on a few minutes ago, a guy who has no warm feelings for President Trump, who said flatly, I would not vote to impeach him.
Talk about premature. How could he know whether or not he'd vote to impeach when the case hasn't been made yet? He hasn't been impeached, and there hasn't been a trial in the Senate. And I think Mueller, and this is my prediction, is going to come up with findings that are going to shock the country, that not only might involve with Russia, but could involve serious financial crimes.
Well, and Shannon Pettypiece, why don't you jump in as we look into the latest with the Russia investigation. So far, at least, it seems Republicans are quite compliant with the erratic behavior of this president.
It certainly does, and you could see the reaction from this meeting, not only in the Russia investigation, but this congressional meeting to see who came out against the president and who didn't. I'm not as good at making predictions as a professor, certainly, but I will agree with him that on the Mueller investigation, we are certainly only seeing a few tiny pieces of a much, much bigger picture that Mueller has. And, of course, to your point of making an assessment about whether you would vote for an impeachment now of a president is impossible to do, since we by no means have all of the facts and all of the pieces of this investigation.
Nick.
Shannon, so you and I have watched the Republicans in Congress kind of grapple with the revelations so far with President Trump. And what you and I have seen, I think, is that they have often found ways to deflect it, even to the point of alleging that there is a partisan leftist conspiracy in the FBI. Is there any reason, in your opinion, in your reporting, to think that there is some revelation that would be so earth-shattering as to shake Republicans who are really, really hard for the president out of that perspective?
I think very early on from this administration, Republicans made a decision that there were certain things they wanted. There was legislation they wanted passed. They wanted Obamacare repealed. They wanted tax reform. They want immigration done. That they were willing to make compromises to get certain things done. They also want to get reelected. So they are willing to do certain things and make certain compromises to get elected, depending on which district you're in. And then, of course, there's always been this issue hanging over this impeachment, and again, to this point that it is odd to talk about when we don't have any clear case for impeachment that's been made in front of us, but just the disruption that that would do to the country. And if you do go down that path, what do you get at the end? What do you get out of it? What is the end result? So I think those are the three things I've heard Republicans grapple with.
Jump in.
I make a couple of points in the updated case for impeachment. One point is we tend to have this apocalyptic view of impeachment, which isn't true. If you count Richard Nixon, who resigned because he would certainly be impeached, one of 14 American presidents before Trump have actually been impeached. Gamblers have gotten rich betting on odds longer than that. Secondly, the framers put impeachment into the Constitution as a legal, peaceful means of dealing with a rogue president instead of bloodshed, assassination, revolution. And if you look at past impeachments, they've basically been good, not bad for the country. The impeachment of Andrew Johnson moderated his opposition to Reconstruction. The resignation of Richard Nixon removed a danger to our democracy. And people said, oh my gosh, the impeachment of Bill Clinton is going to weaken the presidency. In fact, the presidency emerged stronger than ever. We need to rethink impeachment, as I point out in my book.
The book is The Case for Impeachment, now available in paperback. Alan Lichtman, thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor.
Shannon Pettypiece, quickly before you go, are we going to have a government shutdown Friday?
There's some real brinksmanship going on right now, especially in the House. They're still trying to thread this needle between the House Freedom Caucus and moderate Democrats in the Senate, and how you get to a deal. We've seen it melt down on Obamacare. Nobody has an appetite for a government shutdown, but again, it's a tough needle to thread, and I mean, we're